In this section, we will cover Linux server security. Introduction. In this section, we will cover how to secure your server and what are some of the tools that you can use to make sure your server is secure and the steps you can take. But keep in mind, there's no such thing as a 100% secure system, and that is why you want to include regular backups and auditing as part of your security plan. If your server is connected to the internet, there is always a possibility that its security can be compromised. So the idea behind security is to minimize the attacks on your system as much as possible. For example, if your security is tight, then an attacker may move on to an easier target. There's some attackers out there on the internet. Well, first of all, if your server does not need to be on the internet, do not put it on the internet. If it needs to be on the internet for whatever reason, then make sure everything is secure, all the steps are followed, and make it as secure as you possibly can. And below are some of the things you want to implement and consider when planning your system's security. Just so that it's tight, your security's tight, you've covered all the bases, and you don't run into issues where someone is just out there on the internet running scans to find easier systems to get access to. Your system should be secure enough so if any new hackers are looking for access to non-secure systems, your system is not one of those. So the first one we will cover is often ignored. It's the physical security of your server. Physical security of your server is probably one of the most important things. If someone can gain physical access to your server, they can break into it and own it. Keep your servers in a data center. Most of the companies nowadays are keeping their servers in a data center, in locked equipment rack, or in locked closets. And a lot of times I've seen that even if the server is there in secure data centers, their racks are not locked. Make sure those are locked. It's also amazing sometimes people who just in the office or if they get access to the data center, they just want to go and look at the servers and put some buttons on or press some buttons to see what happens. That is just something you need to avoid. Your servers need to be locked up, racks need to be closed and actually locked so no one can access the servers who does not need to access those servers. So the physical security is really important. The next one we'll cover is keep the software up to date. It's really simple in Red Hat, CentOS systems to keep your system up to date. All you have to do is just run yum update and your system is secure. I mean, it seems really obvious, but a lot of long known vulnerabilities often remain unpatched or still widely exploited. So maybe it's not so obvious. Maybe people are not scheduling their servers to run regular updates. You should use yum update command often. And how often, that depends on your company policy, but as often as possible. I mean, you need to subscribe to security bulletins for Red Hat, CentOS. You need to know when some new patches, when new security updates have been applied, so you can run them right away. I mean, if you don't have monthly, monthly is too long, maybe weekly or monthly, depending on your company policy. And also looking at the bulletins, if something new comes out and you get a security update, you should update your systems right away. And you should subscribe to, if you go onto Red Hat or CentOS websites, you can see and subscribe to the updates regarding security and patching, etc. That's also something really important that you must do. Next thing is employ the principle of least privilege. What that means is users and processes should only have access to the least amount of information and functions required to do their job. In other words, as you configure file and directory access rights or administrative permissions, Ask yourself, what is the minimum level of rights and permissions that this group or user or process requires in order to successfully perform the required business function? And as an administrator or someone in IT, you need to be very successful, very skeptical, just because a lot of times you will get requests as give us full access to this, or granting someone 777 access to a file or a directory, which means you're giving them read, write, execute, all the access in the world. Sometimes you want to go back and say, why do you need this? Why, if they need to just run some things or just read or write, you need to be cognizant of that. You cannot give everyone access to everything that they ask for. So again, you need to employ the principle of least privilege, because otherwise it'll just get out of control. And that's one good common sense to use. The next one is using encryption. Encrypt data communication using tools such as SSH, SFTP, SCP, and rsync. We've already covered these in previous sections, but these are it'll be very foolish to use unencrypted communication on the public internet. It just seems really unhealthy and foolish to use unencrypted communication on any network where sensitive information such as credit card numbers or other private or personal information is used and stored. You just need to make sure everything, especially if your servers are on the internet, or even if not, make sure you use encryption. Make sure you use SCP instead of CP. Make sure you use SSH, SFTP, etc., etc. Next one to keep in mind when designing your security is avoid non-secure protocols. Non-secure protocols, again, FTP, Telnet, RSH, and our login are protocols left over from more older times when security was less of a concern. You just cannot, and nowadays, you cannot afford to be using non-secure protocols. I mean, these type of protocols make all communications using them available to anyone. Using someone could be running a protocol analyzer such as Wireshark on the internet, and they can pretty much just uh, you know, it read all the communications if they're non-secure. You just need to avoid those. Remove them. Remove them from yum remove command, and remove any non-secure protocols such as FTP, Telnet, RSH, rlogin, etc. And clean up your systems. Um, One thing I would suggest you do is run this command rpm-qa and send it to uh, a text file. I have it set up, for example, in temp folder. You can create a file called installed packages.txt. What it does is it will send you everything that's been installed on your system. Go through your systems and audit them for installed software. And use this, go through each line in that file. It may be a little bit of a hectic process, but you should, as an administrator, or someone who's checking the security or designing the security of your system, you need to go and clean up your system and avoid any packages that you do not need. You need to clean up your systems regularly and remove everything that does not need to be on there. And that's just better security and better common sense when designing your security. Minimize number of services per system. I mean, consider nowadays, most commonly we are using, VirtualBox, VMware, Zen, or different virtualized servers. Back in the day, or even nowadays, sometimes I see people put on one server. They will have Apache, MySQL, Postfix, and many other services running on one system. You don't need to do that. I mean, that's just it's hard to manage, and it makes it easier for someone to find a security hole and access your system. With technology such as VirtualBox or VMware or similar technologies, you can have virtualized servers. So you can have a server for each service. You can have a web server, you can have a SQL server, you can have a email server, you can have an NFS server separately. That's just a better way to go about it, and which companies are implementing on regular basis nowadays. But if you're designing something, or if someone is designing a system with a whole lot of things in your environment, make sure you suggest to have each service put on a different virtualized server. Next thing is enforce a good password policy. That seems really obvious, but sometimes it's not so obvious. It could easily be ignored. Um, Enforcing a good policy is really important, because occasionally you will see some compromised systems on the internet and the passwords leaked, even for big companies out there. And the idea is that you don't want the bad guys to be able to easily guess your passwords. That's why you can use some restrictions on at least 8 characters, use letters, special characters, uppercase, lowercase, which most of the companies are implementing right now. And if you are designing a system, you need to keep that in mind. You can use the change command to enforce a maximum number of days that password is valid, and other options which you can change in etsylogin.defs, where you can also modify the password parameters. And these are some of the things you want to keep in mind when designing your system security or to secure your Linux server. Also, you want to disable the root login, uh, because as you know, root can log in, and everyone else in the world knows that root can log into the system. So if someone's trying to gain access to your system, all they need to try to hack your password. They already know the user exists, which is the administrator, is root. So if you're using root, you would need to implement a security feature in the file /sshd_config, and just go in and disable root. But before you disable root, make sure you have other users created with sudo access. Create another user, give that user sudo access. Make sure you give them whatever administrative features that you need to give them, so they can use, so you can go and disable root login. So once the root login is disabled in the file sshd_config, no one will be able to try to log in as root, and you will be able to log in as the other user which you have granted access to do sudo. So that's one thing that usually system administrators do right away. Also, the next thing is disable unneeded services. You should disable all the unneeded services, whatever's not required on your system. On Red Hat 6, you can run check config --list command to list all the services. On Red Hat 7, you can use systemctl list unit files to see what services are there, and just disable whatever does not need to be running. And that's a really good policy to go through all of that. And remember, all these things you need to most of the time do once and it's implemented. So it does seem a bit hectic, but security is very important. And the next thing we'll cover is delete X windows. This is the command yum group remove X windows. I mean, you just want to remove X windows or the GUI access. It's just most serious server admin would never do that. So if it's installed on your server, just uninstall it. I mean, it's just something that's just not needed. You don't need that. And next thing is implement a firewall. I'm going to cover firewall and firewall daemon for Red Hat 7 and iptables, etc. in the next section in detail. because I think it needs a separate section to cover it in depth. But you want to implement a firewall. Make sure the firewall is implemented. Look at the next section. Watch the video for implementing a firewall and see how you can do that. Excuse me. The next thing is create separate partitions. You want to create separate partitions for everything, especially things such as slash home, slash boot, slash var, slash tmp. It's really important to create separate partitions and such a scheme where it makes it easier to implement disk quotas because a lot of times, certain files, certain directories will, or your system will be running out of space. So if you assign disk quotas, it will prevent, processes or different users or user home directories, etc., to prevent going over their limit and clogging up your system. It's a really good practice. Most of the system administrators create separate partitions, and you should start implementing that as well if you're not already doing it. Um, Next thing is um, block SSH attacks. So there are people who will be attacking your system. So there's a deny host utility, which is an additional way to thwart SSH attacks. Deny host periodically scans varlog auth.log file, which I've listed here, and for repeated failed SSH login attempts. So you can see if someone is consistently trying to log into your system, and you can see how many attempts have been failed. It will give you an idea of what's going on if someone is attacking your system. The IP addresses associated with such attempts are added to etchost.deny file, so you can go and see where these IPs are coming from. Also, you need to change your default SSH port. If you're using port 22, you should change that. And to install deny hosts, you should use the command yum install deny hosts, and to get that file created, so your system can capture IP addresses of where all the attempts are coming from. And let's move on to the next one, which is perform security scans and audits. Um, these are of some of the free tools which are available to you. Depending on if you're working for a company, they may have their own tools which they use. But if they don't, and you need to make sure the system is good, your system is secure, you should get, maybe install Nmap, maybe search on the Google for additional tools. Nmap or Nasus, you can actually search for it. A lot of times you can just install it by using yum install nmap, and it's a port scanner. So it will go in and scan your ports, and then the SUS vulnerability scanner, and they can provide reports on potential vulnerabilities on your systems, and both can be installed using yum, and they will scan your system for vulnerabilities. These are some of the things you can do as a system administrator, or if you're designing your security to secure your system further. And you should also use sudo, which we've covered earlier as well. Make sure Etsy sudoers is the file. Make sure you have sudoers added. You're not using root to log on or SSH to the system. Create users, add sudoers. Vi sudo is used to edit that file. Go in and make sure if you've created additional administrative accounts and they have rights that they need, not more, not less, and stop using root to log in. Next thing we're going to cover is use last log. Last log is something that tells you recent login information, and you can use last log, and you can also use last log -u with the username option, which will show you some more information about who logged in and the recent login information about that person. Let me just run that command so you have an idea. Last log, if you hit enter, it gives you, let me make the screen full so you can have a better idea. Run the command again. It will tell you who logged in, when they logged in, who never logged in, etc., etc. It's also useful in knowing when some manager asks you to find out if a remote worker or a consultant, when they log in, and uh, gather that data as well. Um, Next command is last command, which shows you list of last login users. So if something was broken on your system or something changed and you were just trying to gather more information, you can run the last command. Let's run the last command. Let me clear the screen and run the last command. It will give you a lot of information on what happened, what was the last command run, and who logged in and did what. So it gives you a lot more information of what you need to know, need to check related to your security or system. Additional security tools which you can use. One of them is Wireshark. It's really common. Uh, just go look it up on the internet. It's a free tool which you can use. If you can run scans on your system, you can check what's going on. You can basically use some of the tools to actually try to hack your own system to see where the vulnerabilities are and to make them more secure. So Wireshark is something you want. Snort, Aircrack, John the Ripper. I don't want to go too much in detail of each one. You should go look it up and see which one will work for you. Wireshark is something that I would recommend, and all the other tools that you can find. And they keep changing their new tools all the time, and a lot of free tools. I would recommend using Wireshark and also running scans on your system, and also running or trying to hack your own system to see if your system is vulnerable and if it's easily crackable, etc. The last one we're going to cover today is regular backups. I mean, there's lots of free open source backup tools available. Some of them are listed here. These are free tools you can use, and you can search online for free tools to create a backup system. Make sure you have your system backed up. If something goes wrong, you have your backups in place. And that's one last thing that we're going to cover with the Linux server security, and backups are part of it. These are some of the things you should keep in mind. I mean, this is not everything, but this is the minimum what you need to do to secure your Linux server or secure your Linux systems. You should implement these. You should be very careful when you start implementing. Make sure everything is covered to the point where you feel some comfort. And there's no system which is 100% secure, but you should do your best to make it as secure as you can possibly make it. I hope you learned something useful in this video as well, and I will see you in the next one.